Well, the way I became a festival curator is that originally, when I was very young, I wanted to study theatre, plays and things like that. So I went to university in New Zealand, in Dunedin, and studied theatre for a while, and I enjoyed it, but I wasn't very good at it either, really. I mean, I passed, but I wasn't very good at it. And I became very frustrated, I suppose, with what I wanted to do in theatre, but wasn't able to do. So I would have what I thought was a good idea. I'd want to have a play, put on a play about that, but it couldn't, because gravity or, you know, certain things you can't do with characters and things like that. And I became a teacher. I was teaching theatre studies in Portland, in Oregon, in the United States. And I was talking to my students about all of these problems that I was having, trying to interpret an idea into a piece of theatre. And one of the students said, you're in the wrong art form, you should be in animation. And he brought me in a VHS tape, this is going back, you know, about those, and it was a film by a Canadian called Jacques Drouin, and it was a film called Mindscape, and it was made on a pen screen, and Mindscape is nothing but just one image turning into another image, turning into another image, turning into another image, and I realised it was as quick as that. And I finished that job. I managed to talk my way into getting a job as the animation programmer for the New Zealand Film Festival, and I did that for a little while, and I met a couple of filmmakers who lived in Melbourne in Australia, and they knew a lot about making animation, and they'd made a film, but they wanted to screen their film, and they'd travelled showing their film, and they couldn't understand why Australia didn't have the kind of animation festivals that they were seeing overseas when they travelled with their film. We began communicating. I shifted from New Zealand to Australia. They knew a lot of people locally. I knew how to run events and things like that. We made the Melbourne International Animation Festival back in 2001, and it's just really grown since then. And it's turned into a lot of other festivals as well. The Melbourne International Animation Festival still runs. We're about to have our 20th anniversary. It helped start the London International Animation Festival, which I'm a co-director. It has a touring festival that goes around Australia called the Australian International Animation Festival, which is quite small. And I'm the animation programmer for the Sydney Film Festival. I'm still the animation programmer for the New Zealand Film Festival, and often 2 or 3 times a year I'll be invited to curate programs for other festivals around the world. So for me it just sort of happened. Persistence. I think building a network of filmmakers and of distributors and of schools is really important. I think you need to have an open mind about what a good film is. I think because nowadays so many of these films are being made, you need the ability, particularly as a curator, to be able to look at one film and say, it's great, I liked it, I didn't like it, but be able to just go, that's that experience, and move on to the next one, and be able to look at the next film with fresh eyes and an open mind all over again. Because if you see as many films as we have to watch nowadays, I mean, my festival receives 4,000 submissions, that's a lot of films to have to go through. And if there are 20 films about butterflies, it's not fair to the 20th film to say, oh, not another film about butterflies. You have to be able to look at that from scratch. I think you need to do everything that you possibly can do to understand the changes that are happening constantly in the animation scene, so that whatever you curate relates to those and speaks to those. And from my personal perspective, you need to never ever lose sight of the fact that animation of the kind that festivals tend to show is an art form, and the art should be the first thing that you're always thinking of when you're looking at any given film. That's a good question. I think there's no one scene. I think there is a very strong, at the moment anyway, a very strong scene within the university and tertiary training world in animation in Australia. That seems to be in pretty good shape. I think we have a number, over here on the other side, I think we have a number of really great master Australian animators, the likes of Dennis Tupikoff and Adam Elliott and Anthony Lucas and Lee Whitmore and all of those sort of people. And they're struggling, I think, to find funding to make their work, but they're still making really great work. The problem that we have right now in Australia, I think, is that there's a real problem that animators are having in the middle part of their careers, if you like. So they leave school and they may get a job working in a studio, but a lot of the studios aren't making the kind of films that they'd like to make. And there's now not much funding for people to make those films that help nourish them until they get to the position where they can tap into a bigger audience for their films. I think the commercial animation scene in Australia isn't too bad in Sydney and in Melbourne, but everywhere else probably a little hard. I think the other thing that I think about Australian animation is that as I've been working in it for 20 years, and I do not understand why there is not more of an Indigenous animation flavour, if you like, in more Australian animation. I don't have the reason for that, but that's still not really happening. But it goes up and down. It goes up and down. It's very subject to funding. It's very subject to how well schools and things are doing. Yeah, we're working on that right now. The particularly VR, less so than AR, I suppose. But VR, people are still trying to figure out what to do with VR. And I've seen some great, really fantastic examples of VR animation everywhere you go. The problem that we're having is the same, as a festival, is the same problem that a lot of other festivals are experiencing, in as much as how do you show that to a reasonably large audience. So, I don't know, I could take, and we do, you could get 12 or 15 films that you like, you put them into a program, you screen them in a theatre, and 20 people come, or 50 people come, or 500 people come. It starts at 4 o'clock, it finishes at 5 o'clock. It's all good. VR, wow, you need a whole standalone room, you need a lot of equipment, which is often not so much difficult, but often very expensive and a little bit tricky to relocate and set up. You have a lot of other issues that you don't have within a standard cinema procedure, in as much as you often need people to make sure that the audience, when they're watching, don't bang into walls or trip over each other. You need people to keep an eye on the equipment to make sure it's not damaged or stolen. And as often as not, you can only show any given film to one person or a couple of people at a time. So the best example that I've seen that I can recall lately is what the Ottawa International Animation Festival is doing, and they have an entire gallery space in the downtown gallery, and they've got a lot of people going in there, and the VR competition program, which is a selection of half a dozen films or something, runs all day. It runs from 10 o'clock till 6 or 7 o'clock at night, 5 days of the festival. A lot of festivals can't afford to do that, so how do we show that? I don't really know, but we're going to have to find a way, because there's more and more of that work being done. A lot of it's really good. For me personally, with the 20th anniversary of the Melbourne International Animation Festival coming up, I'm going to think about whether I want to continue doing all of the stuff that I've done for MEA. I'm doing a lot more writing now. I am now teaching, lecturing at universities, and I'm becoming more and more interested in making sure people know more about the history of animation. That's kind of my thing. I have a real interest in saving our archive. We have an archive of 45 or 50,000 films that I'd like to do something with. What I hope is that I can go on programming MEAF in other words, doing the curation, but pass all the other administrative jobs on to somebody else. That would be great. But we'll see. But I think more writing and more teaching is what's coming. As I get older, working 12-hour days, running a festival is becoming harder and harder to do. Berlin Joe, Guangdu, Guoji, Donghuo, Ji, Wa Wa, Kin Lai Quan.